Hello, and welcome to Let's Be Frank.
Hello.
Hi. Um, this is a bit different to what we normally like, kind of pick a topic and talk around it. This is quite specific. We're talking about a poem, but I suppose it opens a bunch of doors. The poem was introduced to me by Herman many years ago. It's called This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin. It's a little bit controversial, and I'll apologize to my mom before I start reading it for two reasons. One, the foul language, and the second one, because it sounds a bit accusatory towards my parents or anyone's parents. So it
Mm.
starts This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin. They fuck you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old style hats and coats, who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man, it deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. um, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting instruction. Um, I had a long chat with ChatGPT about about this poem, and
Okay.
and I asked my friend ChatGPT to write some counter poems, and he gave me a few. None of them were kind of award winning poems, but I kind of was trying to look at the other side of things because I agree with this poem, but because I believe this poem to be true doesn't believe that I don't have other truths or that I believe everything else to be false. Like, there are a lot of positives that come from your parents too, but uh, let's get your thoughts on it.
No, absolutely. I think the discussion we had last time where we talked about decency, respect, kindness, empathy, tolerance, and morals.
Yeah.
Morals, which kind of like encompasses all of those things and so on, led us to talk about this because I mentioned that parents have a bigger responsibility to make sure that their children turn out more decent human beings.
When you say
Um,
bigger responsibility, you mean compared to teachers or,
correct,
yeah, other
correct.
authoritative figures in children's lives?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So, I think I mentioned that what I term to be the decay of society uh, um, has got a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
We and this is, I think, one of the themes of the poem is like it doesn't matter. Each generation can read that poem and go, yes,
Yeah.
I agree with some of it. And in future generations will also be able to read that and go, yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, so the I think the negatives that are mentioned in the in the poem are not obviously not intentional because parents want to do the best possible. Well, most parents want to
Yeah.
do the best possible for their kids, give them the best opportunities, etc., etc. And maybe some of that can be questioned. Um, but I think that so much is of producing the next generation is outsourced.
Yeah.
And that I think is a problem. That is a for me is a bigger concern or a bigger problem than the mistakes that parents make.
Yeah.
If I can go back and do things differently with my children, there are definitely some things that I would do differently.
Yeah. And
Um, And I'm sure every parent on the planet will agree with that.
Yes,
Well,
I can't comment on that because I don't have my own children, but I would assume that most parents would be able to look back and say, I wish I had done this a bit differently, or I wish I had taught them that, or yeah, like I'm pretty sure about that.
yeah. Um, Look, in terms of I mean, I think it is so true what the poem describes. You know, whatever parents fear, you obviously transfer that to your children.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm in a position now where I can actually watch my grandchildren grow up, and I can look at it, that one generation removed, um, and I can see how my kids are doing it differently.
Yeah.
You also see how the world has changed. The world has changed a hell of a lot, um, and you can't predict. You can't predict, especially if you have young children. You don't know what it's going to look like in 10 or 20 years
Yeah.
down the line. So you do the best with what you have and what you know. Um, there's an interesting study. I couldn't find the source of the study. And if I remember correctly, it was a Danish study that looked at the influence of parents versus peers
Mm-hmm.
in how children grow up, um, and develop socially. And that particular study found that peers have a bigger influence than parents. I think it makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
If you look at in the very early years, the kind of up to age 3, 4, 5, parents will have a much bigger influence.
Yes.
And then as soon as children start going to school, um, which I think in modern society is actually an earlier age, where they go to daycare,
Yeah.
where they socialize from the time that they learn to speak, um, and kind of the ability to reason, etc.,
Yeah.
develop. They are exposed to more children. So I think that influence may be a little bigger from an earlier age. But you can just think back to your own experiences, especially when you get to adolescent age, your peers will have a much bigger influence than
Yeah.
your parents in most cases. So, we talk about the acceptance and relations and social skills and risk behavior,
Yeah.
um,
Fears. Yeah.
fears, etc., which is very much for all of us driven by what our peer group, which I think one of the best things that you can do is to, I don't know, make sure that your kids socialize with the correct people.
Gotta be careful, yeah.
Got to be very careful here because you also want to expose them to, I don't know, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's not like you want to shield or shelter them. But anyway, so look, if you think, honestly, I think that the outsourcing, because just lifestyle wise,
Yeah.
parents are extremely busy. most households, both parents work.
Yeah.
The amount of time that they have available to spend with children is a lot less. So you do outsource that um, to daycare, to school. Very few parents, I think, pay enough attention to the education that their children receive.
Yeah.
So I know that that may also be a very controversial statement that I make here. But what I mean by that is that people accept that the curriculum
Mm-hmm.
is the best or the correct, which I doubt is true.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not talking about a specific country or a specific schooling system. But if I just think of just things that I recently saw, um, there was recently there was a survey done about the reading ability of kids in the US.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's shocking.
Yeah.
It's absolutely shocking. Now, the US, as the richest country in the world, if that's what the statistics look like there, what does it look like in most other countries?
Yeah. Well, here there's also Rishi Sunak is committed to getting people to understand mathematics because apparently people's maths ability in this country is too low. I don't want to talk too much
Yeah,
about it because maths has never been one of my strongest suits. I don't want to get into it.
it's yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar with Laszlo Polgar.
No.
Laszlo Polgar is, I think he's still alive, as far as I know. But he basically did an experiment with these three daughters. Um, it's quite fascinating. It's pretty well described in Wikipedia, um, where he has this theory that geniuses are not born, but they're made.
Mm-hmm.
That if you take a child and you put a child, basically any healthy child, in the right environment, that you can train them to genius level.
Yeah.
And he
Was
did
this
that
the
with these three.
chess? Is this the chess
Yes,
guy?
yes, yes, yes,
Okay, I
yes,
have heard of this
yes,
before.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. So all three his kids are very good at one in particular excelled to be the highest rated female player. But then you also think of other examples. Um, Tiger Woods is a very famous example, from a very early age. The Williams sisters in tennis, Andre Agassi is another one. And I think so on and so on and so on. You
Yeah.
can go through a list of people with parents with a focus. As soon as a child shows aptitude or interest in a specific, I mean, you can go very far back in history. I mean, Mozart
Yeah.
is a good example of that. So imagine Mozart was just sent to daycare um, and said, well, okay, cool, we'll let the government system, school system, education system take care of you, and the world would have been a lot poorer for that.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't really have a solution because modern lifestyle and, like I said earlier, pressure placed on parents' time um, doesn't really allow us to spend the necessary time and develop children. Um, there was another guy who also did a very interesting study. I think it was back in the 1970s, a guy by the name of Benjamin Bloom,
Mm-hmm.
where he put students through a program of tutoring. So, different, if I remember correctly, different types of, some of them he only gave 1 hour, got 1 hour a day or 1 hour a week or something like that. But those students that got full-time tutoring performed so much better. What's exciting about that is with the advent of AI, and, the ability to get somebody to explain a subject or a particular problem from any angle is becoming so much easier.
Yeah.
And to give children their own personal tutor that will very quickly learn certain behaviors, etc. I think that's exciting for the future.
Yep.
In terms of education.
Yeah.
But that's only part of what we're talking about. And I don't know which is the more important part. I feel like, the morals, which parents cannot outsource, or the education. Anyway, what are your thoughts on it?
I don't want to get into morals again, because then we're going to go, whose morals and what morals?
Yeah.
But I'm very torn about it, because I really like the poem and it resonates with me. As I said in the beginning, when I was looking at it more in depth, I was thinking to myself, this is very cynical and harsh, and it's not looking at any of the positive side of what your parents do give you, because there's a lot of that too. But then I came back to the whole thing that just because you believe one thing to be true doesn't mean you believe everything else to be false. Which is why I kind of interrogated the poem a little bit, and I also interrogated Philip Larkin's life a little bit to see why maybe he had a more cynical view. His parents were separated. It sounded like his dad was a bit of a philanderer. His sister was a schizophrenic. So there's a lot of influences that maybe made him a bit more cynical and looked at the negative side of things. That doesn't, again, take away from the fact that the poem still is relatable to everyone. I'm following the last line of the poem. I'm not having my own kids, so I feel like there's something that really resonates with me in that, and maybe one of the many reasons that I've decided not to have my own kids is the fact that I don't want to pass on all of my insecurities and my issues and my medical problems and all sorts of things. That's maybe a small part of the reason that I wouldn't want to have my own kids. But I also just I'm terrified of raising children in society, and I don't think it's in today's society. I think it's always been that way, that there's just so much that you can't control, as you've mentioned, what they're learning in the curriculum, and it's scary that you don't have full influence over what your child becomes. So even if you are a very involved parent, even if you do teach them all of the good that you want to teach them, there's still all these other things that are influencing who they become. I don't know. I find it a very stressful topic to talk about.
Yeah, look, I understand that, people's decision whether to have or not have children is obviously very personal and so on. But you've got to think of, if I just in one or two of the examples that I mentioned earlier, if the Williams sisters' parents decided not to have children because they weren't 100% sure what they were going to turn out like, etc., the sporting world would have missed out on these two phenomenal athletes. And hey, what if our parents had the same viewpoint, then we wouldn't be here having this discussion. And we turned out okay.
The wiser.
Exactly. So it is a difficult one, and kind of reminds me of the sunscreen song a little bit as well. When
Baz Luhrmann. Well, I don't think
yeah, the Baz
Baz Luhrmann
Luhrmann,
did the production of it. I don't know
correct,
who
that the
actually wrote it.
production of it, I forget
He had a little
the
book.
lady. Yes, I forget the lady who wrote it as a
I can
commencement,
find out.
as her version of a
Yeah.
commencement speech. But part of what she says there is, every generation go that, the world's going to shit.
Yeah.
Um, you know, when I grew up, politicians were honorable, things were cheap, etc., etc. So the world is definitely going to change. And without knowing the future, it's always going to be scary. So, well, do I really want to put children into this society or into this world?
Mm-hmm.
But when we become adults, we kind of feel confident that we can make it work. We can navigate through this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you giving up on the world or humankind or
Mm-hmm.
any of those things. I mean, you're still optimistic by nature of what your future holds. You know,
Yeah.
but when you, especially when you have children of that age, where you still feel responsible for them and you want to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, like you mentioned in Philip Larkin's case, there was some of the family dynamics may not have been optimal.
Yeah.
But that also kind of describes, I don't know, what percentage of the population do you think that describes? Not that particular
Yeah.
set of dynamics,
Yeah.
but everyone has their own shit that they have to deal with.
Yes.
So I don't think that the solution is not to have children.
No. So what is the solution? How do you pass on the good and not pass on the bad? Because every person I've ever met says, I don't want to be like my mom, or I don't want to be like my dad to my kids. People are very aware of the things that their parents did that they don't feel was a good way of being raised, and they're trying to change it. But as it's mentioned in the poem, and as we've said, you pass on your own things. There's going to be a
Yeah.
negative. I don't know.
How much of what you think people don't want to pass on or raise their kids the way that they were raised is is based on actual experience, and how much do you think is based on um, societal pressures?
In what way?
Well, if you look at the poor generation that just entered the um, adulthood not too long ago, that were raised in the everyone's brilliant and got participation trophies and etc.
Yeah.
That generation that was very much raised in that very little discipline and very little competitive
Yeah.
activities, etc. They kind of had a bigger struggle to adapt to adulthood and life where you have to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty well documented. And I think that they will obviously raise their children differently. But I think that there was a movement that caused more and more people, all of society didn't at once have this aha moment of let's not let's not teach our children the value of winning or being competitive, etc.
Mm-hmm.
There was definitely some movement that got everyone to agree to, okay, cool, this is the right way to do it now. In the same way that we see certain things happening now in society, especially where we again, the education system, what's good and what's not good for kids and so on.
Well, it's the whole thing of
That's,
trying not to offend anyone, and so you don't actually
yeah,
teach
yeah, yeah, yeah,
anything. Everything's kind of airy fairy because you don't want to say anything that might
correct,
offend anybody. Got to
correct.
protect everyone's
Um,
feelings.
Inclusion, equal outcomes, all of that shit.
Yeah.
And I think logically, most people see that this is going to end badly.
Well, I don't know if there's any person in the world who thinks that there's a world where you can't offend anyone. Like, there is no. We've spoke about this before. There's no world peace. There's no everyone's happy and living in harmony. Like
No,
that's it's not even a utopia. It's like that's not something that you could even fathom or consider. It's impossible. And I don't think that that is what we would want anyway. I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. We would all be vanilla. There would be
no.
nothing
It
of
would
any
be very
substance.
boring.
There would be no
It would
substance.
be, yeah, there'll be no substance, and also it'll take away a lot of our opportunity to grow and develop
Yeah.
and form our own opinions, etc.
It would be, have you seen the movie Equilibrium?
No, I haven't.
The only way that that can happen is if we all get highly medicated, you lose all books, movies, anything, and everyone is like a robot. They just get to work, do their job, go home. Like there's no thought, there's no intellect. It's a good movie, by the way. It's with Sean Bean.
Okay. It sounds to me like in some respects we well on our way there in terms of
Burn the
everybody
books.
being medicated.
Yeah.
We're burning the books.
Hmm.
We don't like
Also the
anybody thinking their
artwork.
own thoughts.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
artwork, no statues, no history.
yeah,
History is a thing of the past, literally.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. It's a difficult thing. I think that the bottom line is like you said right at the beginning. There's some things that resonate with that, but with you from the poem, and the fact that we do that, every generation will do that, but it doesn't take away from the fact that that there's a lot of appreciation for what parents do for their kids.
yeah,
Maybe the whole point of it was to just be a little bit of a warning to
yeah,
parents
yeah.
and be a bit more aware.
And it's not necessarily about what you're specifically teaching your kids. It's kind of how you act and the things that they see you do and how they mirror your behaviors and your thought processes and your approach to things and your reactions or responses to things. It's like, it's not necessarily very specifically about what you teach your kids.
Mm,
Yeah.
correct, yeah. Anyway, it's a very difficult subject, as you say. We should probably have just steered clear of this because it becomes so easy, and I don't want to be a hypocrite about this, but it does become so easy to go and look at society, whereas I'm part of society. I have a
Yeah.
responsibility to this society. I can't just sit here and point my finger um, and expect everybody else to go sort their shit out.
Yeah.
So from that point, it makes it difficult for me to kind of, okay, cool, what does my responsibility look like?
Yeah.
And how do I contribute to a solution rather than the problem?
Yep. It would be a great world if everyone looked at themselves, looked inward, and thought about how they could sort their shit out.
Well, I can just take my advice. I know how to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think um, I think Philip Larkin had really good point, and I like I said, the poem resonates with me, and it's why I've brought it up a few times since you introduced me to it. when I look inwardly at myself and some of the hang-ups that I have or things that I wish I didn't have or didn't do, and I think, oh, that's something that my parents instilled in me or that I learned from them. But at the same time, there are very many times in any given day where I think something positive that I'm doing or something positive that I'm thinking is also a result of what my parents instilled in me. So I do think there's no black and white. Everything's grey. Or colourful. I
Yeah.
don't know. Colourful.
Look, I suppose again there are these extremes, but if you look at um, the average person who goes and says, "Yeah, I can see that my parents fucked me up in some way." Those things that they instilled in you,
Mm,
those fears, whatever, behaviors, whatever. I mean, fortunately, you can change.
yeah.
Fortunately, you can decide that I want to do this different, and how do I overcome this fear or this whatever. There's a there's a lot of things that I'm sure that if parents look at their kids, that they would go, well, that's not how I taught you. That's not what I meant for you to do.
Yeah.
So I think it
Also
kind of
true.
runs both ways
Yeah.
in that respect as well.
Yeah.
But we get to that point where, yeah, we have to take responsibility for this. You
Yep.
know, whether it was our parents that intentionally or unintentionally caused us to behave or operate in certain ways.
Yeah.
Change those habits.
Read Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
No, I think this has been quite a heavy topic actually. I think maybe next week we need to go a little bit lighter, something fun.
Yes,
But
definitely.
thank you very much. I think everyone can resonate with this how they do. I mean, think what they think about it and feel what they feel. But I think the end goal that we always kind of mention is kind of look at yourself and challenge yourself on how you can be better. Whether or not you've learned habits from your parents or your peers or
Yeah,
your teachers or whatever, just have a good look at yourself and think about what you can do to change them.
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well said. Thanks, Ali.
Until next time.
Cheers.